Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, the long-awaited defense gear set build video. This video is long, and just so you know whether or not it's valuable for you to spend the time watching it, here is what you're going to get by the end of this video. You're going to get a practically invulnerable shield, a bonus 30% damage resistance, bringing you to a total of 540k toughness, 20% bonus weapon damage, and an additional 16% when Massive finally fixed the bugged ballistic shield mods. You're going to get bonus accuracy and stability on your weapon without even needing to mod for it. You're going to get 30% reload speed plus a bonus chance to stagger your target. You're going to have an SMG that has an optimal range of 27 meters, which is roughly the same as most assault rifles. You're going to be able to completely sidestep the limitation of the gear set whereby you are not allowed to change weapons, and most importantly, completely sidestep the limitation of the gear set whereby you cannot get critical strikes. Those are going to be completely ignored. A huge amount of bonus ammo through the One Is None talent is also on the way, effectively doubling most of your magazines. You're going to have a guaranteed 1.4 million toughness when your shield breaks and you find yourself in tricky situations. And at the end of all of this, you're going to have the ability to speed run challenge mode PVE content solo, completing stuff like Lexington in less than 9 minutes while you farm for a Barrett's chest piece. If all of this sounds too good to be true, it's not. It's all legit, 100%. It's all there. So stick around and we'll talk about how to get it done. What's up guys, it's Skill Up here. My very first swing at this video was a complete mess. It was part opinion, part build guide. It would have made nobody happy, so I've actually decided to split this video in two. This video will cover how to build what I believe is not only the best PVE gear set in the game, but also the highest DPS gear set in the game, eclipsing the mighty Alpha Bridge, which everyone's loving at the moment, and also allowing you to solo challenge mode content with ease. The second video, which I'll release later, will be a review of this gear set where I share my thoughts on the design and balance of this set in a PvE context, and where I offer a prediction of what changes I expect to see in patch 1.6 to this gear set. I've actually included some timestamps down below in the description for this video if you want to skip to specific parts, so check those out if you like, but for now, let's get stuck into the detail. So let's start with the very basics, since I get many comments from people asking me how I'm able to use an SMG with my shield. When it comes to the defense gear set, it seems like many players haven't taken the time to equate themselves with it because they've likely categorized it in their minds as a tank set. Now this isn't the case. The defense gear set is a DPS set first and foremost, and the minute you start thinking of it as a DPS set, you'll start to wrap your head around just how powerful this set is. The two-piece bonus is simple enough, 15% elite damage resistance. This means that when I take weapon damage from an elite, a yellow bar enemy, that I take 15% less damage. This is actually calculated before my armor, so it's a very damage efficient mitigation stat that's going to greatly increase your survivability. The damage resistance only affects your damage taken, not your shield damage. So if you get flanked or you're shot from behind, you'll take less damage, but your shield will always take the same amount of damage. Not bad at all, given the fact that you will often be flanked by NPCs. The three-piece bonus is where this set really begins to shine. This is a tanking-focused set that lets you use an SMG, but rather than make your shield weaker to offset that bonus DPS power, the set actually increases your shield health by 30%, and this value is calculated multiplicatively, meaning that it takes your base shield health multiplied by any shield health mods you might have, and then multiplies all of that by 30%. The result is that even with the lowest health shield mod and not stacking any electronics whatsoever, you can get your shield to a point where you can confidently tank an entire room of enemies and kill them before they manage to drop your shield. The 4-piece bonus is what defines a gear set, and here in the case of the defense gear set, the bonus lets you equip an SMG while you're using your ballistic shield. Typically, you are not allowed to do this and you are limited to the use of sidearms only, but with the 4-piece bonus, you can do this. It does come with some trade-offs, however. Firstly, you can't switch weapons when you have your SMG out. You can't change to your pistol or even to a second SMG if you happen to be running one. You're stuck with the one weapon, but there is actually a way around this, which is a little bit silly. Simply take cover and switch to a different weapon while you're in cover. So long as you're in cover, you'll be able to use that weapon, but the moment you pop out of cover, you'll pop straight back to your SMG. The second trade-off is that the 4-piece bonus sets your critical strike chance to 0. The design intent here is clear. SMGs are all about crit damage, so if you get to use your SMG with a shield, then you should be doing less damage to offset that bonus defensive power, and the way they nerf your damage is by removing your critical strike chance. Makes perfect sense, right? Well, the thing is, they didn't implement this correctly, and you can still crit a lot. Through things like Pulse, the Precision Talent, and Savage Gloves, you can actually debuff a target so that they are more likely to be crit. It's not about you having a higher chance to crit, it's about those enemies having a higher chance to be crit. So by running Pulse, Precision, or Savage Gloves, you get to completely sidestep the no crit limitation of this gear set, and you can begin doing truly absurd amounts of damage with this set. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So that's the gear set and that's how it works, but how do we build for it in order to maximize its utility in PvE? Well, first of all, let's answer the most important question. Which shield mod should you be taking? So the Ballistic Shield is an ability that does a million things that you probably never even knew about. At its core, it's a shield that blocks weapon damage, and it has a certain health pool that scales based on your skill power and on the number of performance mods that you have active. It also takes damage in a different way than you do, because there's actually a separate formula that Massive uses to calculate Ballistic Shield damage, but we're not going to cover that here. There are 4 mods for the shield. The base mod has about 825k HP at our baseline skill power, and this mod is the vanilla version. You'd actually never use this, as all the other ones are better. Next up is the Reactive Targeting mod, which has the highest HP of any mod at 1.2 million health in this example, or about 60% more HP than the base mod. This is your true tank shield, and it also pulses any target that shoots it so that they're able to take 10% more damage and receive critical chance debuff, increasing your ally's chance to crit by 7.7%. The shield reduces your damage taken by 10% and increases your personal damage dealt by 5%. Next up is the Assault mod, but we're going to talk about this one at the end. The last mod is the Kinetic Breaker, which essentially heals you for a very small amount every time your shield takes damage. This mod has the baseline 825k HP, and it increases damage dealt by 10%. So slightly more than the other one. This shield is essentially the sustain shield, meaning that you are constantly getting passive healing whenever the shield takes damage. It's not a lot of healing, to be honest with you. I kind of feel like this is quite underpowered. As you're seeing in the demonstration here, I'm tanking using the shield, and I'm getting a little bit of healing, but not really that much. I don't think it's a great mod to be running, and it's definitely overkill, given the fact that you're really not taking that much damage yourself when you're running with this shield, so I wouldn't recommend it. The final mod, and the one that will be the focus of this video, is the Assault mod. This mod has only 620k HP, or a 20% reduction versus the baseline, but believe me when I tell you that it more than makes up for it. In return for losing 20% shield health, you gain 20% bonus damage, a 30% reduction in reload speed, a boost to both accuracy and stability, a higher chance to stagger your target, and 200% bonus threat. Yes, all of that for the low cost of 20% shield health. If that sounds like a bargain to you, then you, sir or madam, are onto something. Now, to be fair, this bonus is meant to be applied to a pistol, and who cares if it's applied to a pistol, right? I mean, how much damage can you really do with a pistol? All of this is perfectly acceptable in the world of sidearms, which is what the Ballistic Shield was originally designed to be used with. But when you add an SMG into that equation, things get completely out of hand for a variety of reasons that I'm going to talk about in a follow-up video. So the immediate question is 620k HP enough to tank PvE endgame content? And for how long can we tank that content? Well, I set out to find exactly that when I first picked up this set, and I won't lie, I was stunned at how long the shield lasted. I began by running with the tanky version of the shield, the one that had 1.2 million health, and then I loaded it full of those performance gear mods that increased shield health by 30%. But I found that enemies couldn't couldn't even get my shield to half health when I was trying really hard, so I eventually dropped the mods, and when that still had too much health, I moved on to the Assault mod, the one with half the health, and I thought, no way this is going to work, this is going to end badly, but of course it didn't. So I removed the Ballistic Shield health mods and I replaced them with the Ballistic Shield damage mods that I thought were giving me an additional sort of 18% damage, but I later learned that they are currently bugged and they provide me absolutely nothing. In the past, I've commented that Ballistic Shield health and resilience mods aren't required when you're using this set in PVE, and that's absolutely true. Ideally, you would be using the damage mods for this build, but sadly, they are just bugged at the moment and they don't work. So we'll need to use something else for now until Massive managed to fix those mods. So we'll talk about that again later in this video. So this is the Assault mod, which gives you a crazy amount of bonus damage, 20% bonus weapon damage, reload speed, stagger, stability, and accuracy. And this is the big reason why this build is as strong as it is. And the fact that the shield is practically invulnerable, even on the lowest health mod, means that you have constant uptime of this ability. This is a cover-based shooter, and you get to carry around a giant piece of cover with you wherever you go while still doing more DPS than your teammates. It's a very interesting concept indeed. Now, that's the shield mod, but how do we build ourselves to get the most out of this? Well, to begin with, your three basic non-negotiable gear pieces are your holster, your mask, and your knee pads. These are set in stone because it's the chest, backpack, and glove slots that let us tweak our build to our preference. For your mask, roll damage to elites in the top slot, and for knee pads, roll armor. For both the mask and the knee pads, roll enemy armor damage in the bottom slot for maximum DPS. For your holster, aim for as close to 1200 in each stat slot as possible, and then roll armor in the major stat slot, of course. So here's where things get interesting. Let's talk chest pieces. There are two options that I'd recommend you consider. The first is Reckless. Now, people really ignore the power of Reckless these days, which I think is just ridiculous. You know, when I'm properly geared, enemies in PvE do very little damage to me. So an extra 10% damage taken in return for a bonus 8% damage dealt is really fine with me. It's particularly strong in the context of the defense gear set since your shield is so tanky, and that's the thing that's taking damage, not you. So if you're running this gear set, particularly solo, I'd really recommend checking this out because it's really just a free 8% damage for nothing. The second option is, of course, Barrett's bulletproof chest piece. Now, I know how hard it is to get this bad boy. I farmed mine for 15 hours and only managed to get one after it was donated to me by my main man, Punk Poets. Thank you for that. I will love you forever. If Reckless is your offensive, DPS-focused choice with the defense gear set, then Barrett's bulletproof chest piece is your defensive choice. The bonus skill power it provides when you first pop your shield will give you more shield health, and since your shield isn't technically on cooldown until it breaks or you drop it, you'll retain this bonus skill power when you use your next ability, such as Pulse. When you do use your second ability, and you now have one ability on cooldown, you're now dealing 5% more weapon damage, which is very handy, of course. And best of all, if your shield does break and both of your abilities are on cooldown, you'll find yourself out in the open, but Barrett's chest piece will have given you an additional 10% armor, which jacks your toughness considerably, allowing you to run to cover with ease. It's a very neat package that meets your needs under every condition, so I, for one, run it over Reckless. But as I said, I know how hard it is to get a Barrett's chest piece, so run Reckless if you can. It's perfectly fine as well. Regardless of which chest you run, be sure to run armor in the major stat slot, and a bonus ammo in the minor slot is very important. This is critical as you'll be burning through heaps of SMG ammo, and you'll absolutely run dry without the bonus ammo stats. For backpack, our options here are equally interesting. There's two main options here. The first one is, and the one that I'd recommend, is Specialized. This basically takes a portion of your firearms and stamina and converts it to bonus skill power, which, as we've discussed earlier, will give you a chunkier shield and more power in your second ability. The second option, Resourceful, allows you to heal your shield when you're using healing abilities like Support Station or Heal. So if your shield ever gets low, you can actually heal it. And if you're running, Lorraine's chest piece, you have some bonus skill power, you can top off about a quarter of your shield's health with ease. Personally, I think this is overkill though. Your shield already has more than enough health, but again, you do whatever is best for you. So no matter which backpack you take, run armor in the major stat slot and ammo in the minor stat slot. I cannot overstate how important ammo is in this build. For gloves, you may want to take Savage gloves for more bonus damage. Obviously, roll SMG damage on them and then go for damage to elites and crit hit damage. Don't go for crit hit chance, as this will just get eaten up by your 4-piece bonus. It will just set it to 0. However, the 7% bonus crit to targets out of cover provided by Savage will not get eaten by this, because again, this isn't buffing your chance to crit, it's debuffing the enemy's chance to be crit. That's what makes these gloves so good in this build. There's also Decisive, which increases sidearm headshot damage by 35%, but I've confirmed that this doesn't work with the defense gear set, which to be honest with you is a good thing. Otherwise this set would be even more ridiculous than it already is. So at this point you're wondering what's the best combination to run given all that I've just talked about. You know, reckless and specialized and resourceful and savage. Honestly, it comes down to what you have on hand and what your preference is. For my money, I like the synergy of Barrett's plus specialized backpack. It gives me lots of bonus skill power that I can funnel into a second ability. But similarly, if you wanted to go reckless and savage for maximum DPS, then that works too. Try them out and see which you enjoy, but trust me when I say they are both equally viable. You just need to play a little bit more carefully when you're going for that pure DPS build. For gear mods, obviously we're doing the predictable thing where we balance our stats so that we can reach our firearms requirements of 4800 for weapon talents, and after that we pile the rest into stamina. Make sure all your mods have bonus armor on them. There's a few people out there who would argue that since you have a shield in front of you, you really don't need to stack toughness. You can just go full glass cannon, putting everything into firearms. And while technically this is true, it's also just a little bit silly. The fact is, firearms scales extremely poorly, so stacking it beyond the 4800 mark to hit your weapon talents is really a total waste of time. It just gives too little benefit, basically. Better to put that into stamina to increase your survivability should you ever find yourself flanked or needing to reposition without the benefit of your shield. For weapons, obviously you're going to be using an SMG, and you may think, hey, I should use 2 SMGs so I can switch between them when I run out of ammo. No, remember of course that you can't switch between weapons while you're using this gear set. Ideally, I'd strongly recommend using an LMG in your second slot. Your shield will generally not break, but when it does, you're sitting behind cover waiting for your shield to come back up, and the LMG is the best weapon to suppress your enemies and keep them behind cover while you wait for your shield to come off cooldown. It also works extremely well at range, which is a shortcoming of SMGs, and if you use something like the M60 or the M249, you can pretty much fire constantly and your shield will be back up before you manage to empty your clip or your magazine, or whatever it's called, I don't know. Get ready for some raged comments. Your SMG mods are extremely important. Remember that any crit mods you put on are completely wasted, so ignore crit chance mods. But as we've said, you can still crit, so crit hit damage is fine to stack on. More important than anything though is headshot damage. You do a truly ludicrous amount of headshot damage with this build, since you are constantly standing in front of your targets, shooting them in the head. So, stack lots of headshot damage as much as possible, get it on your scope and on your muzzle, get an extended magazine for more bullets as well, and here's the really critical one: put optimal range in your underbarrel slot and on your scope. One of the biggest shortcomings of this set is the fact that you can only walk when you're carrying your shield, so you're very slow and it's hard for you to close distance quickly. The extra 75% optimal range on your SMG allows you to shoot targets at nearly the same range as most assault rifles, around 27 meters, which means that, even when your target is far away from you, you're still doing effective DPS. These mods are absolutely critical to this build. Do not overlook them. For weapon talents, you're focused purely on damage here. Responsive is our most important weapon talent since it's perfect for the way that we're typically positioned against our targets. Destructive is also very good given this is a PVE focused build, and then ideally something like Fierce in the third slot is best, or perhaps Brutal if that's the best you can manage. Don't shoot for anything crit based like Vicious, since all that crit also gets eaten up by the 4-piece bonus, and avoid any utility talents like Swift or Accurate, since the bonus weapon handling provided by the Assault mod is all that you're going to need. For your character talents, the most important one of the lot is One is None, which gives you 50% chance to return a bullet to your magazine when you land a headshot. This talent right here is one of the biggest reasons why this gear set is the best PvE DPS gear set in the game at the moment. You are constantly standing in front of your targets, getting huge headshot accuracy. I'd estimate somewhere in the vicinity of 80% plus. This means that the value of this talent is huge. It nearly doubles the base size of your magazine when you use it, something no other build can realistically achieve. This talent is an absolute must on most builds, but especially on this one. Precision is the next most important talent. Remember earlier when I said you can still crit with this build? This is one of the ways to do it. Precision will actually pulse any target you headshot and will apply the base value of your currently equipped pulse mod. This is a very helpful trick that many people don't know about, but you can actually change your pulse mod to tactical scanner to get the 10% bonus damage it provides, and your precision talent will then give you that 10% bonus damage as well as 7.7% chance to crit, even if your pulse is not active at the time, even if you don't have pulse equipped. If you change to a different pulse mod, you'll lose that 10% bonus damage on your precision talent. So this is a free 10% bonus damage that no one really knows about right now, but now you do. On the move is an extremely helpful survivability talent. Killing a target while moving increases all damage resistance by 30%. Again, this does not decrease your shield's damage taken, only your own, but it's super helpful if you ever find yourself outflanked by the enemy and taking damage. It essentially jacks you from 400k toughness to about 540k toughness. It also synergizes extremely well with the last talent that I'd recommend, which is critical save. Using a med kit while in your last health bar increases all damage resistance by 40%. So imagine this, you're in the middle of a firefight, your shield is destroyed and is now on cooldown, and so is your second ability. Barrett's chest piece at this point is now giving you 10% more armor. You've just killed a target, so you've procced on the move, and you've also popped a med kit while in your last health segment, proccing critical save. How much toughness do you have? You have around 1.4 million toughness at that point. If that sounds a little bit ridiculous to you, yes, it is. You're pretty much unkillable at that point. For comparison's sake, Survival Link, when you use it, gives you around 800k toughness, so this is a hell of a lot more than that. For abilities, you're not going to believe me when I tell you this, but in PvE, you really don't need heal with this build. I ran heal to start with, and over time I came to realize that I just wasn't taking enough damage. I dropped it and I went to Pulse instead, so that I could extract the crit value from everything on my gear, including the passive benefit provided by my SMG. Pound for pound, this is the best DPS focused ability in the game, so I'd recommend using it all of the time, even if you are already running precision, since this pulse is going to give you more value than that base precision talent is. If you wanted to go for something a little bit more fun, you could go for something like Seeker Mines or Turrets or whatever. They'll work well, so long as you've got a decent amount of skill power, which you will if you follow this build, so it's really up to you and your sort of personal playstyle and preference. The very last piece of this puzzle is what type of gear mods you should be using, given the fact that weapon mods are currently bugged. Well, as I said earlier, when they get fixed, go straight to those. They're the best. They're like 16% bonus weapon damage is just crazy. But in the meantime, I'd really recommend Ballistic Shield Damage Resilience. These reduce the damage that you take if you are ever flanked by an enemy, which will happen from time to time. The base 10% damage resilience provided by the shield, plus the additional 20% provided by these gear mods, brings you to a total of 30% extra all damage resilience, which is a lot of toughness. For example, the 30% provided by On The Move jacks you from 400k to 540k, and since we're getting 30% all damage resistance from these mods as well, while you have your shield up, you essentially have a constant 540k toughness. You are very tanky indeed. So to recap, once again, here's the full list of stuff that I showed you at the beginning of this video. With all of that detail out the way, you now understand how to achieve all of these things and why this set is so damn powerful. You are a tank and a DPSer all in one, and you don't need a healer. You are the holy trinity of RPGs in one, and the immediate question is this build in its current state good for the game? It's an important question that I look forward to speaking about in a later video. In particular, I'm very keen to address some DPS modeling around this. I've said in this video, this does more DPS than Alpha Bridge, and many of you at this point are like, that's bullshit, man. On-sheet DPS on a good Alpha Bridge build is like 400k. On-sheet DPS here is like 230. No way is this more DPS. trust me when I tell you, it is absolutely 100% more DPS than Alpha Bridge. And I'm going to talk about that in the next video. So stick around for that one. It should be up later in the week. In the meantime, if you liked this video, then be sure to drop it a like. It took me a long time to put together. I've been sort of, teasing this one for a while. I haven't been messing with you guys. I've just been super busy and I wanted to get it right. So if you liked it, please do drop it a like and be sure to subscribe. This is the stuff that I love doing, this sort of theory craft stuff. It's totally my jam, and you can certainly expect plenty more from me in the future and the Christmas break. For now, guys, take good care. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.